Welcome to Bridging Chicago, a podcast that aims to connect our listeners to Chicago's business, community, cultural, and charity leaders. Brought to you by the SATC Solutions Center. You can connect with us on Instagram or Twitter, where our handle is @BridgingChicago. For more information, including our email, visit us online at satcsolutions.com. Be sure to rate and subscribe to Bridging Chicago on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to this podcast.
Hi, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Bridging Chicago podcast. I'm Nathan, your host, and I'm so excited today to be joined by Helen Cameron, who is the co-owner alongside her husband, Michael Cameron, of Uncommon Ground, which I'm sure many of you have heard of because they are wonderful. They have been in Chicago for 30 years, and I'm really excited, Helen, because we've talked to a lot of people who are business owners and who have entrepreneurs started different things here and around the city, and we seem to get a lot of people at the start of that. And so to talk to someone who's been doing this for 30 years, I'm really excited. I think you must be a wealth of knowledge, and I can't wait to hear it because we're all really excited around here. So thank you for joining us today. Thanks for your time.
Well, thanks for having me, Nathan.
Yeah. So as we were looking at, so I've been to the restaurant a few times, and I know a lot of my friends have been, and it's a really unique experience. It's that rural experience here in an urban area, a really all-inclusive one, and even more so than I realized. That I've been there, and I didn't even realize how much you all are doing. But we really want to start at the beginning. We always talk about the journey and what it was like to get to that place, and so take us back to the beginning of the partnership, not just of the restaurant, but the partnership of you and Michael, and sort of when you met and what that was like, and then if you ever imagined that this is where you would be today.
No, not 33 years ago, I would not have known or imagined where we are today, but I certainly wouldn't have been surprised either, by where we've ended up. I have an awesome partner.
Well, tell me about that partnership when you met. What was it like at that point, and sort of where were you at in life, and what was it like to meet and then get to that stage of actually becoming a partnership in life?
Well, Mike and I met working. I was working at DB Kaplan's, and he was a manager for the Levy organization at the time. He just finished some time at Ravinia, and then they moved him around. So I got to work with him at DB Kaplan's, but also at Cubs Stadium, at Comiskey, at the Chicago Stadium when the Bulls were playing, or sometimes when the Blackhawks were playing. So I would move around, and they would move their management around as well. And I got to know him pretty well working together. And then we ran into each other at a holiday party, and I had learned that he recently became the general manager of the Chicago Theater when the theater reopened, of the food service. And so I was like, I would love to work there, if you'll have me. And he's like, well, I need help modeling uniforms. Do you want to be one of the people to come help me with that? And I'm like, absolutely. And then afterwards, we ended up having dinner together, and then we saw a movie. And then it turned out he lived a few blocks away from me, so I gave him a ride home. And then when we were saying goodnight, he laid a kiss on me that was quite memorable. And so from that moment, we started dating, and we moved in together in February. So we started dating in January, moved in together in February, and then he proposed to me in April.
So that timeline is impressive.
Yep, super fast.
Scary.
Yeah, it was scary. It scared the living daylights out of me because I just didn't really plan on getting married. That wasn't part of my life plan. I would have been fine just living together.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that was a little worrisome for me, and eventually, I had this conversation with him, but he was smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day. And I've always been an avid non-smoker, so that was a bit of a problem. I felt as though I would be committing my life to someone who is systematically destroying theirs. And
Mm.
when I when I told him about it, he pretty much decided to quit cold turkey on that day, and he hasn't smoked since.
Wow.
And so when he went through that, and he just made that decision so immediately, it really made me realize how committed he was,
Yeah.
to wanting to be married, and I think that's what eventually led me to walk down the aisle. So that was quite a commitment, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
so
I mean, really early on in this relationship, then you're learning a lot about, not just a lot about your partner, but a lot about someone who you would eventually end up in business with, that I think is really important, because obviously the decision to compromise and just say, if this is that important to you, I'll do it. The ability to do it cold turkey and to walk it out. And then also the passion to say, like, I'm gonna kiss this woman who I really like and see how she
yeah,
feels, and then hopefully it goes from there. And I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you're learning about this person in such a short amount of time. Do you feel like, I mean, is that the case? Were you learning a lot about him, or are you learning a lot about each other and kind of how you would partner together?
yeah. I mean, it's been, a constant learning curve, really. But the good thing that we had going, we had a really great professional foundation to our relationship, prior to sort of falling in love, and this like-minded way of going about working in a restaurant. And I think, both of us are lifers. We're those people
Hmm.
who, you're just enamored by this business, and that's what you want to
Yeah.
do with your life. And I think, we both had that in common. And then, after we got married, Mike became the general manager of a fine dining restaurant downtown called Michael Stewart's, and I went to work in the kitchen at the 95th. I had always been straddling front and back of the house in my restaurant time. And then he just was fully into management, and just kept, going up the rungs of the ladder. And then eventually he became, the food and beverage director at a small hotel. It was called the Richmont Hotel at the time. It's on
Mm.
St. Clair in Ontario, downtown, so right by
Okay.
Northwestern Hospital.
Yeah.
And it had this little French bistro called the Rue St. Clair. It sat about 100 people inside. It did food service for the hotel, and then it had a big outdoor area. And he brought music. He brought jazz there on the weekends. And eventually, he basically convinced me to become the sous chef at the hotel, because the chef there needed help. I didn't feel like I was qualified at that level at that time, but he's like, look, I know you're going to do a great job. I know you're going to work hard. I'll support you. The chef will train you. You'll be able to do this. And so that's when, I sort of got in a little bit more of the management end of things. And then eventually, the ownership of that hotel was French, and they really loved the idea of having a husband and wife team running their restaurant.
Yeah.
And at the time, they also weren't fond of the current chef. He was very American, more like an American country club type of chef. Like his repertoire of food and so on was a little bit more on the American side, and they wanted their menu to really be more traditional French bistro, like beyond what he was doing. And even though I didn't really have a lot of experience, I really wanted to be better, in that arena. So I really worked on that. And so eventually, I was 24 years old. I became the executive chef of a hotel kitchen. And
Wow.
it was so supremely challenging. And I think I worked like 90-hour work weeks. I mean, I was there virtually all the time. I would come home to sleep, and then, maybe take a half a day to like do laundry and that kind of stuff. Luckily my chef stuff was getting cleaned at the hotel. So But we really worked hard. And after several years of really turning that operation around and making it really successful, we decided to move on and do our own thing. Of course, we didn't have any money. We didn't own anything. We didn't have investors. So we started with some help from my family and his family on a very small scale. We opened an espresso bar first in the Century Mall on Diversey and Broadway.
Okay.
And after a few months of doing that, we realized, oh my God, this is not going to sustain us both, with the types of professional challenges we're used to dealing with, number one, and
Yeah.
then number two, just financially. And so we decided we would look around for, a space for a cafe. And we found one on Broadway in Roscoe and put a down payment, first month's rent down. And then we're following up with that landlord, and he sent us our deposit back and said, I'm sorry, I won't be renting to you. And it turns out that Starbucks took that location. That's when they were just coming into the city, right? So we were so disappointed, and we were kind of broke. So I had coupons to go to Subway, like buy one sandwich, get one free. And
Yeah.
so one day we were like, well, let's go get some sandwiches and then we can look around, for another space. So we go to the corner of Clark and Grace and we park. And right where we park is this little storefront that says for rent. And, it was 4 blocks away from our apartment and in a neighborhood that we kind of knew and understood. And so I went to get our sandwiches. And then in the meantime, Mike decided we were going to call and see if we could see this space. And it was at 1214 West Grace. And when we walked into that space eventually to see it, it was somebody's apartment, but it was a storefront. And my imagination, the minute we walked in there, I could just see our place. I could see it. I could see people coming and enjoying themselves and, having good food and drink. And, Mike wanted to have entertainment and I wanted to have art on the walls. And I could just see all that stuff in this place. And we got really excited about it. And then we were able to rent it. And it ended up being, a really amazing thing and a favor that Starbucks did us by taking the Roscoe space, because the space that, was our original Uncommon Ground space at 1214 West Grace, we eventually were able to expand in 1220 West Grace. So 1214 was 1991, 1220 was in 1996.
Okay.
Then in 2004, we added the 3800 North Clark space. And then in 2010, we were actually able to buy the building after almost 20 years of paying rent there.
Wow.
And so then we added another dining room in 2011 and the brewery, Greenstar Organic Brewing, in 2014. So we've had quite an evolution in that space. And I'm really thankful that, we were able to grow like that and then eventually, own the building and have sort of control over our future. That has been a really amazing, difficult and, just really an amazing evolution that looking back, I just really appreciate all the support we've gotten from our community, especially now. We just had our 30-year anniversary party, and it was the first time we actually had an event since COVID. And, I'm just so eternally grateful for all the support over all these years of our community, of all the musicians that have performed, all the artists that have shown their work, and, all the good people in our community that have supported us. It's, eternally grateful. Huge gratitude.
So I have like 7,000 questions in all of what
Okay,
you just
ask
said
away.
because there's a lot there. But
Yeah.
let's start with this because I always felt I served for about 4 years, maybe less, maybe more, but it was about 4 years. And I loved it. It was an experience. I worked at an IHOP in Champaign, Illinois, U of I, and I worked from like Friday at 11 p.m. till Saturday at 7 a.m. So the overnight Friday shift, which was, I've seen the nuttiest things
I'm
ever
sure
there.
you have.
um, and then I went from that. I worked at a very touristy pizza place here in Chicago, in the Loop, and I worked at a nicer Italian restaurant. And so it's just like three very different types of places and experiences. And because of that, I've always felt like everyone should work in the service industry, whether
Absolutely.
it's retail,
Absolutely. Everybody
everyone should do it.
should, yes. I think that's a
And,
prerequisite for life.
well, I assumed you would feel the same way because every restaurant person I've ever talked to has said that. Um, can you share what it is that you think people can learn from people who serve, or people who work in the industry, or like I said, those retail industries in general? Can you share what it is that you learned, or what it is that you've learned from your staff that might help
Mhm.
people?
Well, I think the reason why so many restaurateurs feel that everybody should work in service in some way is I think it's a life skill, hospitality, kindness, listening. These are all life skills that if you're able to sort of integrate and help people and serve them, um, I think that you're more apt to be successful in life, right? You
Hmm.
you connect with
Hmm.
people, you listen to them, you care for them. Hospitality, I mean, that's a really big calling. It's a high calling as far as I'm concerned. I think I got a lot of my hospitality chops from my mother, who's like the ultimately hospitable person. She was always wanting to feed people, baking cakes and welcoming people into our neighborhood. And she worked at a country club in Long Beach, in Michigan City, and everybody there knew her. All the members knew her because she took care of everybody, and she knew certain people had certain needs, and
Yeah.
I think that's what makes the world a better place, right? It's a
Yeah.
quality of life issue, I think. And if you're able to give good service, then you also appreciate other people who are serving you. um, and I think that's the other side of the coin, is to really understand what somebody in the service industry is going through and to be empathetic and understanding as well.
I think empathy is one of those things where you didn't hear a lot about it before, but more recently, even in business, is people are talking more about empathy. I've had more people come on the podcast in the last like year and a half, and talk
Yep.
about how they're learning empathy in relation to themselves, giving yourself grace, and taking time for yourself to, the work life balance, having empathy for their clients, and then teaching their clients to have empathy for their customers. And it's one of the things that it is a common theme, because I think when you share stories, which is what we do here on the podcast, is we just want to share stories. We want to share, what people are doing. And so when you share stories, you learn a lot about empathy, because it's either something that people really want that they don't always feel they get, or it's
Mhm.
something that they work on a lot in order to give it. And it's just not something that usually comes easy for a lot of people. And so for you, having these customers who come in, who I know you treat them like family. I know you treat them like they are the most important people, because not only are they driving your business, but you're sharing experiences with each other. And so
Right.
for you, I think when you look at empathy in terms of business, what does that mean for you, and how do you help culture that? How do you help cultivate it? Like, just as you grow basil for, food, you have to cultivate that as well. And so what is that like for you, when it maybe isn't something that has always been really focused on in the past?
Well, I mean, empathy is such an important I think, element in being able to sort of develop a concept, right? So for us,
Mm-hmm.
we look at the restaurants as community centers. They're
Mm-hmm.
much more than
Mm-hmm.
restaurants, first of
Yeah.
all. And there really isn't anything in the US like it, and probably not on the planet like it, because we try to have something for everyone, right? So you're trying to take into consideration, the population at large, and then in your little place, try to offer something that would make them feel comfortable and at home and happy. So down to earth service, really good quality food. So I look for local food, organic as much as possible. I grow a good amount of our own food on premise, um, and I share that with as many people as I can, and I try to educate people about it, so that urban agriculture is something that will continue to grow and blossom, not just in Chicago, but in any urban center. We have people who visit us from all over the world. Um, but in the menu offerings, there are so many people with so many tastes and preferences, and then dietary restrictions.
Yeah.
And, over the years, it's been very important to me to A, understand what's happening in the food world, so that B, I can prevent buying any types of ingredients that I feel are not healthy. I really try to stay away from misery meat and poisonous produce. So, um, I really take into consideration the animals
Mm.
that we use on our menu.
Mm-hmm.
Only
Mm-hmm.
grass fed beef, no hormones, no antibiotics, cows living in sunshine. They're healthy, they're happy, they've had a good life, and now they pass that good energy on to us. Same, local chickens, no hormones, no antibiotics. I don't want any unnecessary chemical additions into my food. I try to stay away from GMO products as much as possible. um, and I try to buy as much as I can locally, because I feel like we need to relocalize our food systems. So I'm looking at a much bigger picture. And then on top of it, we add the sustainability piece of the puzzle. I certified with the Green Restaurant Association for 5 years in a row. It's a lot of work because you have to recertify every year.
Yeah.
Each restaurant during that time span got to be the greenest restaurant in the US, according to the
Oh.
Green Restaurant Association. And we also certified and helped to create the Green Seal certification here in Chicago. And so I certified with them for 2 years. But, our rooftop farm at our Devon location, which we opened in 2007, has the first certified organic rooftop farm in the country. And then, we have the certified organic brewery, which is the first in the state of Illinois, and one of only
Wow.
about a dozen or so in the whole country where we only brew organic beer, not just one type of organic beer, but all of our beer is certified organic. And we're buying local grain and as much as we possibly can, any other ingredients that we need for the beer, but it's all certified organic. So there's no Roundup on my wheat or on any of the grains that are in my beer. um, so we think about serving community, like, just well beyond waiting on somebody and giving them food and drink. We look at it from a much grander scale, but also community includes a certain amount of culture, right? We have so many different types of people, in near both locations, and so we have live music. We have local artists showing their work, and our menu kind of reflects a variety of dishes. Being on common ground, we can kind of seek out things from ideas from all over the world, but we're using local food and sort of the idea of comfort cuisine to sort of ground things in our menu. And then we're seasonal because you want to bring in the things that are the freshest and closest to home, and so you're constantly changing your menu so that people who have dietary restrictions, they have choices when they come to us. We make sure that vegans have interesting,
Mm.
delicious food. Vegetarians, meat eaters. We try to have something for everybody. Um, and that's, where sort of a greater sense of empathy comes from, and making those connections to our guests. And I think that's why, we've been able to succeed for 30 years, because I think people
Yeah.
appreciate the extra work. There's a lot of educating going on constantly about what's happening in the food world. Um, and we really strive to be sort of leaders uh, in the arena of sustainability and urban agriculture, and just be a great community-based restaurant.
Yeah. Being leaders, being the first is really daunting, can be really scary, can be, I'm sure you
Mhm.
get a lot of different reactions to that. But for you, what does it mean to be the first certified organic restaurant in Illinois? What does it mean for you to be a leader in the urban agriculture movement? Because a lot of places now you go there and they say, okay, we're like, this dish is organic or this dish is vegan, or it's like
Mhm.
they're trying to integrate that, but you kind of wonder what the motivation behind that is. Whereas when I hear what you're saying, the motivation isn't like put as many things on the menu so you can like get every kind of person in to get as much business as you can, but it seems to be a lot more of like, we care about the people who are going to step in the door, and so we're ready for you, we have something for you. And not only is it going to be like we have vegan dishes, but we have vegan dishes that you're going to enjoy. They're going to
Mhm.
be new, they're going to be different, they're going to be colorful, they're going to be, you know you're going to have a lot of experiences here. And so for you, like, I mean, whenever you're the first, it could always be either really great or it could just fail, and like, people could just keep going down the street to a chain restaurant or something. Not
Mhm.
that chain restaurants are bad, but certainly what you're doing, there's a lot of level of risk involved in that. And so when you think about that, or when you think about being the first and leading in that direction, how do you like look at that risk, and then what's the mentality for you and for Michael to take that on and to just say, like, we're going to do it, and we believe that it's going to be successful because we care?
Mhm. Well, having the first certified organic rooftop farm in the country was actually a surprise. Um, when we viewed the building originally, it was a cold day in February, but it was sunny, and we brought a ladder so we could climb up to see the roof of the building, because we were interested in putting our second restaurant there and buying the building. So Mike was holding the ladder for me, and I climbed up. And as soon as my eyes cleared the parapet wall and I saw this wide open space with a silver, rooftop, the first thing that popped into my head, and I think about food all the time, but the first thing that popped into my head was a giant, like heirloom red tomato, like red
Mm.
ripe. I just could see this. And so I looked down at Mike and I'm like, we could grow food up here. And I remember him looking up at me with this like pleasant look on his face, like, okay. So then he climbs up. And in the moments that we were up there, we made the decision that if we're able to buy the building, two things are going to happen here. One is solar panels. Two is I'm going to grow food on this roof. And then he's like, yeah, and we can have people dine up here. And I'm like, oh no, 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 no. Dining can be downstairs. There's a big parking lot. So we could use, a big chunk of that to create an outdoor cafe. I'm like,
Yeah.
no, no, I want this to be a rooftop farm. Like, and this happened just, we're just chatting, and he's like, and I'm like, yeah, I'm like, we should use as much of the space as we can to grow as much as we can. And that's why I want to use it. It's hard on servers running up and down stairs with
Yeah.
big trays of
Oh,
food
yeah.
and drinks. I've worked in a place like that before, so I knew that. I'm like, no, I mean, we can have parties and events, and do things on an easier scale up there, but so main dining downstairs, but then upstairs farming. And so good thing that we made that decision right from the get-go, because then we were able to buy the building. um, and one of the big things that we had to do in that building was we had to dig the basement down another 5 feet and expand the footers of the building, because Mike's 6'4", and literally in the basement he was walking around bent over. And there were places where I could stand up straight, but not always because all the pipes and things, the plumbing and the gas lines and whatever. So we knew we were going to have to do some major work to do that. And it was a risk buying the building and then having to do all this extra work. But then we were able to get TIF funding. I think we were
Mm.
like the poster child for what TIF funding should do, which helped us purchase and rehab the building for the restaurant because we needed all that basement space for our prep kitchen, for our green room, for big walk-in coolers, all that stuff. So an office, um, and it was a big risk. And then eventually, we had to have somebody build up the deck, put in the solar. We have solar thermal up there that heats our
Mm.
water, and those solar panels provide us with about 10% of our energy every year at that restaurant. And after we did that and we bought the building at Clark Street, we put the solar panels on at Clark Street as well because it was such an effective, cost effective alternative energy source. um, but we didn't quite find out that we were the first until we in 2008 we finally, like by mid-July, had everything built out, and the city gave us a $20,000 rooftop farm grant, um, that came through sort of ComEd, and it was from the Department of the Environment, which helped us then complete being able to plant the farm the first year, which was really helpful. And then someone asked the girl that was helping me with the farm, Natalie, and she was like, "Natalie, is anybody else doing this?" And both of us were like, "I don't know. We don't know." So we checked in. There are several certifying bodies in the United States. Generally, you go with someone who's in your region, but we got a list of everybody, and Natalie called all of them and asked, "Hey, is anybody certifying any kind of a rooftop farming project?" And every one of them said, "Nope, we don't have anybody doing anything like that. It's all farmland." So that's how we found out that we were the first certified organic rooftop farm in the country. And we really had an awful lot of support from the city getting through this and getting this done. And another thing, we're hugely grateful for. Mayor Daley was in charge at the time, and he came and he did a ribbon cutting,
Mm.
because he wanted Chicago to be the greenest city in the country. And
Yeah.
we were just another group of people working towards that effort here in the city. So that was cool. And then the brewery, Mike always wanted to have a brewery, and it wasn't until 2014 that he was able to make that happen. And we knew there weren't too many people brewing organically, and then eventually we found out that there was no organic brewery in the state of Illinois. So when we finally certified through MOSA, uh, we ended up being the first in the state, and one
Mm.
of a dozen or so all over the country that only brew organic beer.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I ask you about this because we've talked a little bit about things around this, and so I want to make sure we talk about it. But I mean, obviously, the great thing is that you know where the food comes from. It's organic. It's good for the body. You know, it's good ingredients make good food. And so,
And I will say
unfortunately,
drinks as well.
yes, there you go.
Can't
Yeah.
you can't forget the drinks.
No,
A lot of
no.
people are now tuning into what's in my food,
Yeah.
but
What's in
sometimes
my
they're not
drink?
really thinking about that. What's in my drink? You know?
Yeah. It's a great point.
Yeah.
Um, one of the really tough things that I always wrestle with is food deserts, and food deserts not just meaning the availability of grocery stores or restaurants in certain areas, but
Mhm.
the availability of healthy options for people who are in, especially the south and west sides here in Chicago. Um, but even sometimes in areas that you'd be really surprised where there just aren't good options to get organic produce at a good price, and organic for whatever reason is so much more expensive than regular stuff anyway in a lot of places. But
Mhm.
what, as far as social responsibility for you, for Michael, for the restaurant, um, what are your thoughts on that? And then do you see that changing at all, or do you see areas where there are, especially minority people or people who are in lower economic classes who have struggled to get really good options? Um, do you see a shift in that, or have you been able to be a part of sort of helping that too?
Yeah, yeah. Yes, there's a lot of work going on in the city right now with numerous organizations that are doing great work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was on the board of Growing Home for many years, which I consider a sister farm. They're the other organic farm in the city of Chicago, and they they have a platform of job training. They're down in Englewood, and for many years now, they've been training people who have had problems with entry into the workforce to, on how to grow food, on how to market it. And now they've also included some level of sort of helping people to learn how to cook food. There's a shortage of cooks, so to have a place where you can learn a how to grow, b how to go to a farmer's market and sell this food, or c you know potentially cook. That's a great entryway into the working universe. But to bring urban agriculture into places where there are food deserts then allows people to come and buy good, freshly grown food at a good price. um, and the farmers markets that they sell at too, they have ways where I forget the word for it now, but there's a it's like food stamps where you can buy a certain amount of fresh food for a very small amount of money, so that
Mm. Okay.
you're able to have good fresh food. And so that's really happening in a lot of the food desert areas, and I think that element is growing in the city as time goes on. Like urban
Yeah.
agriculture really needs to continue to grow and improve in any city, because with the big drought that's going out west right now, there may be a time where we're not going to be able to rely on California and the West Coast for our food. There's going to be a time where we're not going to be able to rely on Florida, perhaps, for a good amount of our food. And the Midwest has some of the most fertile land in the world here. We should be growing a good measure of our own food here, so that we're not.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to travel. It's just such an inefficient system, right? So if we could just grow more and more food in the Chicago area, in vacant lots, in places where you know nothing's happening, let's make use of this. And then by extension, another thing that I'm really advocating for is, having compost
Mm-hmm.
as a third waste stream. We have our recycling, we have our landfill, but we really shouldn't be putting in anything that's compostable into landfill. That's just like throwing gold away. That's something
Yeah.
that we should be using for fertility all over the city in the outlying areas. And so that's kind of a thing that needs to kind of come to pass as well over time. So I think there's a lot of things developing and working together right now to keep improving and hopefully, you know, getting rid of some of the food deserts that we're dealing with here and
Yeah.
then, all over the country, really.
Yeah.
And part of the Rooftop Farm project, over these many years, we've had groups of interns that we've taught and trained how to grow, through the course of the season, how to design a farm space, how to project, the seeds that you need to buy, and then the produce that you're going to get at the end of a season, and um, how to do this organically in containers and not in containers. So some of our graduates, and at this point we've had over 100 people that we've brought into the urban ag world. Some of those people have gone on then to work for, Growing Home and other organizations that are doing this work. And so we feel like we're also sort of the entry level space where we're training people to get started in this arena and then move forward out into the world and, continue that mission. So, we feel like educating people is a really big part of our mission in this regard. Know where your
Yeah.
food comes from, support your local farmer, grow some of your own, you know, uh, and support the restaurants and the places that are supporting our local people.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
um I'd like to end with this question. It's sort of a two-part question, but I think it goes one into the other. And so um one of the reasons, and probably the reason, that Uncommon Ground is so ecologically conscious is because that is the value of yourself and of Michael. And so why was it important that you sort of take your values and put them into this project? And then alongside that, how have those values helped you to sustain what we've been through in the last year plus, where we're all going through this pandemic together and everyone's just wondering, is that restaurant that I used to really like, is it still even there? Are they going to still survive? So how have those helped you in that situation as well?
Mm-hmm. Well, we have been very idealistic, and it's just Mike and I. We're not this big organization. We've had a lot of ups and downs over the years. Um, and when COVID shut us down so unceremoniously, just before being open for 30 years, I mean, we were pretty devastated. We But we, at a certain point, we made a commitment to each other that we would do whatever we could to make sure that we survived this. So that was kind of a thing that I think we both needed to do together. And, every day, was our goal to just hang in there and do whatever we could. But I think, our idealism through many of our ups and downs, have made a huge difference in our ability to manage through these difficulties. I think number one, because we've developed this reputation that our guests appreciate and support. They support that idealism. And so, every time we thought we weren't going to be able to hang in there, and we sent out a big email asking for help, uh, so many people, ordered from us, and, got food delivered or came and picked food up, and always words of encouragement from them, and appreciation and thankfulness. That was really kind of an amazing thing. But also because, we spent so much time developing the way we run our business sustainably. One thing that I talk about a lot when I talk about sustainability is that, a lot of restaurant folks kind of feel like it's very expensive to be sustainable. And yeah, sometimes, certain ingredients or supplies will cost more because they're organic or because they're compostable, or, whatever the case may be. The better product sometimes is a little bit more expensive, right? But there are a lot of things that you can do that will save you money. For instance, having solar thermal panels. It was a rather large investment, but we got a rebate and then we got a tax break. And in 4 years' time, these panels were paid off, by gas savings. And then now it's just a constant savings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
we switched to all LED light bulbs at a time when one light bulb cost $50. Now they're less than 10.
Yeah.
But at that time, we spent several $1,000s, but then we found that we were saving about $500 a billing period on electric because we switched to LEDs. Not to mention the fact that many of the LEDs that we put in years ago are still the same LEDs that are giving us light now. So I haven't replaced, 10 to 20 light bulbs at $10 each. And then I put in hand dryers. Now, I was never a fan of hand drying. If I had a paper towel option, I would use that. But when I became educated through the Green Restaurant Association as to all these varieties of things that I could do to be more sustainable, I realized, well, it makes a lot of sense. So I spent $3,000 to put hand dryers in 6 bathrooms at each restaurant, 3 bathrooms at each restaurant. And I suddenly realized that I was saving $1,200 a month at each restaurant on paper towels. And then not to
Yeah.
mention then manufacturing those and transporting them. And then the waste of the paper towels. Like I just took out this whole layer of carbon footprint
Yeah.
by making that maneuver. And, the electricity was, pennies in comparison. And so I was saving so much money by making certain changes. We now have our water metered, right? I have, the little controllers on all my faucets. So, I still have good pressure, but I'm using a lot less water. And,
Hmm.
I'm saving water. And for the farm, I have irrigation that drips right to the plants. I don't waste water everywhere. So, it's a matter of being efficient with your resources, right? And choosing the types of things that make a difference so that your company can be successful. And, we opened our Devon location in 2007, and then we had that huge crash in 2008. And that restaurant is not in a main commercial zone. I mean, we're up in a
Yeah.
neighborhood and we're near
Yeah.
Loyola, and it's not, Devon isn't this big pedestrian, roadway. I mean, it's a destination location there. And I've survived there for all these years through all this craziness, because we run efficiently, we run sustainably, and the things that we spend our extra money on, it's meaningful. It makes a difference to people to have that better quality product or that item that has been well thought out, to to be more sustainable, to kind of in our way address climate change and be better citizens, and also to be the example of what is possible. I mean, look, we're not a big restaurant group. It's just Mike and I and 2 restaurants, and we've been able to do all this stuff, right? So I kind of feel like there's no excuse for any other restaurant. Like, it can be done. You know what I mean? It
Yeah.
can be done.
Yeah.
We are living proof that it can be done, and we want to be the example of the change that we want to see in the world. And having done that all these years has really allowed us to succeed and to really connect with our communities and to feel that support firsthand, especially now after COVID, is just one of the most remarkable things we have experienced. I mean, we really, my heart is just constantly full of gratitude right now. I am just so appreciative of the fact that we're still here. We're having a great summer season. People are coming back, and we're able to hug each other and see each other again. And it just feels so, so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it does. I absolutely agree. Well, Helen, if anyone who has heard this podcast and isn't like crazy inspired or energized to go do their thing, then I don't know, maybe they had it on mute the whole time, because it's just been really great talking to you. And
Yeah.
I'm really just inspired by the leadership that you and Mike have shown, and just the fortitude to keep going, because that's where it's tough. We've been through a lot, not just this year, but I think in my lifetime, having gone through things like, it kind of started with 9/11, and there's just been a
Yep.
lot of things that have happened. You mentioned 2008 and the economy, and now with COVID, and it just seems like there's things that come along that just make it tough. But to hear how you've just gone through all of these things, and you've decided to keep going is really inspiring. And I mean, the restaurants are amazing, but I think that your attitude, your personality, and your it's just contagious. So I thanks so much
Very
for
good.
sharing.
That's what we want.
Yeah,
Make
absolutely.
make all this good stuff contagious and spread it
Yeah,
around.
for sure. That's why we're here.
Yeah.
Hopefully to share that. So if you want to visit either of the two locations, they are at 3800 North Clark Street, and that is the home of their organic brewing. So I will definitely be visiting that one, hopefully very
Yes.
soon. And then there's also a location at 1401 West Devon, and that is the first certified organic rooftop farm in Illinois, in the US actually. So kudos to both of you. Thank you so much for what you're doing. And I really hope that you continue it for another 30 years because I love it. And I know many of my friends who have been there, they all love it. So we look forward to going once again. And we're so happy that we can go out, we can be safe, we can do the things that we need to do to keep not just ourselves, but everyone else safe as well. So please respect the staff as you go out and you celebrate getting to be together in the Chicago summer again. So Helen, I want to thank you so much for your time again, and thanks for joining us. It's just been great, and we look forward to hearing more from you sometime down the road.
Thanks, Nathan.
And this is another episode of the Bridging Chicago podcast. Of course, we thank you, our listeners, for tuning in. It's always great to interact with you. You can interact with us at Bridging Chicago on Instagram or Twitter. And of course, on our website, www.bridgingchicago.com, where you can listen to this episode in all of its various forms, as well as all of our other season 4 and prior episodes. So thanks again, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Bridging Chicago, as produced by the SATC Solutions Center. Nothing contained in this podcast shall constitute financial, investment, legal, and/or professional advice. No professional relationship of any kind is created between you and the podcast host or guest. You are urged to speak with your financial, investment, or legal advisors before making any investment or legal decisions. Furthermore, the opinions expressed in this podcast are not necessarily the opinions of SATC Solutions Center, SATC Law, or any of its employees. This podcast is created by the hosts and guests' individual capacities. All opinions on this podcast are or have been rendered based on specific facts, under certain conditions, and are subject to certain assumptions and may not and should not be used or relied upon for any other purpose, including but not limited to, or use in or in connection with any investment purposes or legal proceeding.